Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for this Margins Meets event. I am so excited that you're here. My name is Susie Q. Smith, and I work with The Word. We are a nonprofit organization working to build a publishing community that will fight for inclusivity. Our mission is to promote voices from underserved communities and diverse backgrounds, to honor the stories of those who have faced adversity and injustice, and to provide a sanctuary space where these groups will see themselves in literature. My role with The Word is to direct the biannual Margins Conference. Launched in 2020, Margins was created by and for people on the margins, promoting the inclusive representation of experiences in literature for communities who have historically been excluded. Margins is a biannual conference, book fair, and literary festival happening in Denver, Colorado, and online August 5th through the 7th, 2022. To learn more about it, please visit our website at thewordfordiversity.org. We are so excited to welcome our guests today, all of whom are humans who I personally know and love. And if you don't already after today, I'm sure you will as well. Our readers today are Alejandro Jimenez, Jessica Helen Lopez, and Rowie Shebala. Each of our guests will offer a reading of their work, followed by a discussion of their approaches to craft and collaboration, cultivating community and collectives, and the impact of literature. We'll be dropping links in the chat for their books, their websites, and social media. And if you have questions, please post those in the chat too, because we love for this to be as much of a dialogue as possible. So, enough from me. I would love to meet our guests. Our first reader today is Alejandro Jimenez, who is a poet and writer from Colima, Mexico, living in the United States. He is a multiple time TEDx speaker in the US. He's a National Poetry Slam semifinalist, regional Emmy nominated writer, and the 2021 National Mexican Slam champion. He is a formerly undocumented immigrant to the United States, and his work focuses on cultural identity, immigrant narratives, masculinity, memory, and the intersection of them all. His self-published collection of poems, Moreno, Prieto, Brown, 2017, has sold over 2,000 copies and has been incorporated in high school and college curriculums across several states in the US. And I will post a link to that book so that you can check it out for yourselves. But without further ado, please welcome Alejandro Jimenez. Hello, Alejandro.
Hello. How's it
How are
going?
you?
I'm doing well. How about you? How's your
I'm
life?
so here.
What's bringing you joy, Susie?
Your face right now, and poetry
Thank
is
you.
definitely bringing me joy. Being in community, so many of us have been in physical spaces together for a long time, and now we haven't been for a long time. So it's really, really bringing me joy to see you and to be able to hang out and listen to you read poems. So I'm going to
Awesome.
take myself off the screen so we can get into it.
Word up. So, yeah, thank you all for having me. My name is Alejandro Jimenez. And yeah, let's just get to it. The poem, this is the title of the poem. Poem about immigration without using the following words or phrases or any of its variations. Immigrant. We/they just wanted to work. Dreamer. Border. Deported. Separation. ICE/La Migra. Immigration rate. A better life. Living in the shadows. Citizenship. Papers. We are home. Etc. etc. This, of course, is a working title. In the photo, I'm 3 years old. And off camera, our dog, a black and red Doberman without a tail that we nicknamed Mocho, was still alive. He hadn't eaten whatever made him start puking uncontrollably, which caused my grandmother to ask my uncle to put Mocho out of his misery. I stood atop the basurero as Mocho's lifeless body, now with a hole in its head, was thrown down the cliff into the river. There was a lot of trash, but Mocho was the first dead dog I had seen in it. His body stopped rolling, belly up, and over time I would watch the sun, crows, insects, and other dogs uncover the pearly white ribs hidden underneath his black fur. I would make a habit of visiting Mocho. In the photo, I am 3 years old and I'm smiling at the camera. I got a knife in my hand and I'm cutting into the cake, but I don't remember eating. Off camera, the mandarina tree has not been cut down and the lemon tree is planted in a bucket. It was August. It was cloudy and muggy that day. My grandmother threw water on the dirt floor to keep the dust from rising. Onto my cake, of course. Thank you, Grandma. In the photo, I am mostly complete. I've not met grief. It was the first time I met my mother. Well, my first memory of her anyway. In the photo, I'm wearing an all blue outfit. Even then, I disliked wearing all one color. I remember feeling blue that day. I remember that I ran into the bedroom and hid under the bed, and my mother tried to console me, but she was a stranger back then. I would not have a memory of her until I was 8 years old and I was standing on carpeted floors, and the smells and the house were all new to me. Even the bird songs needed translating. I felt like Mocho, belly up, unable to shoo away the insects, coming to nibble on my flesh. That is the first one. R.I.P. Mocho. Poor dog. Um, Here's the next one. It's a short one. It's titled Un Poquito. As we cook together, I ask my mother for a recipe. And everything she says is grab with your fingertips un poquito of this, un poquito of that, una cucharadita of this and of that, no más. So, jefa, how much es un poquito? Pues un poquito, mijo, es pues un poquito. You'll taste it and you'll know when it is good, she says while flipping a tortilla with one hand and stirring a pot with the other. And the recipe, it is not about the dish I wish to learn to cook. It is about the trust in and with your body to know when enough is enough. That's the second poem. Thank you, Mama, for teaching me how to cook. Here's the last one I'll read. This is the title of the poem as well. Poem about being Mexican without using any of the following words or phrases. Mexican, brown, tortillas, la Virgen de Guadalupe, piñatas, Jesucristo, Mexicas / Aztecs, borders, tacos, immigration, horchata, tequila, banda norteña, cumbia, mariachi, chalino, cerveza, raíces, Cancún, Tulum, Cabo, chupacabras, La Llorona, arriba, arriba, ay Chihuahua, Frida, cholo, chola, chingón, el canelo, la bamba, tamales, pozole, menudo, drug cartels, El Chapo, El Cucuy, botas, vacas, caballos y gallos. This, of course, is also a working title. The evening after we buried my father, my grandmother suggests that I set my alarm early. The trash needs to be out in the corner by 6 in the morning, she says. The alarm sounds at 5:30 a.m., and I listen for my father's footsteps. I wiggle my toes. I run my hands over the bed sheets towards my lover's body. I bend my knees and take a deep breath. My neck is stiff. My eyes dry. I know soon a part of me will be a ghost. I startle back awake and my cell phone shines 5:57 a.m. on my face. I jump from the bed and rush to the back patio and pick up the bag full of trash. It is surprisingly light and it smells of rotten meat and coffee. I sleepily balance atop the cobblestone street towards the corner. I notice the red brakes of a big truck a few blocks down. I am standing in the middle of the street and I ponder if I want to run with the trash bag to catch the truck. A man silently approaches me and I ask, Oiga, ¿ya pasó la basura? No, he responds. ¿Y a qué horas pasa la basura? I cast those words at him, trying to catch some hope that would save me from my family's ridicule from sleeping through my alarm. He slightly smiles at me. Pues como a las siete, he says without breaking a stride and disappearing into the dark. I am not one to believe strangers, so at the second man that is walking towards me, I ask, Oiga, ¿a qué horas pasa la basura? Without breaking a stride, es como a las ocho, he says while disappearing into the same dark as the man before him did. Standing in the corner, shivering and holding the trash bag, resent begins to grow towards my grandmother. She didn't raise no fool, though. So at the third man that walks towards me, I ask, Oiga, ¿a qué horas pasa la basura? He stops briefly and looks around. Pues como a las 9. Esa no tiene hora. His tone borders sarcasm as if I should know this information already, but I don't, and apparently neither did my grandmother, but she didn't raise no fool, so I ask the man that is now staring at me very confusingly, Oiga, me dijeron que dejara la basura aquí en la esquina. ¿Dónde exactamente dejo la basura? I admire his patience. Pues, por allí. He points nowhere in particular as he walks into the same dark as the two men before him did. I finish telling this story next to the table where my father had his last beer. My whole family explodes in laughter. My grandmother makes excuses. My aunt howls at the ceiling. My mother smiles and shakes her head. My girlfriend's face reddens from giggling. Thunder comes from our brother's throat, and no part of me feels like a ghost in unison. We all catch our breath and head over to the next room to start my father's rosary. Thank you all so much for listening. I will see you all back in a little bit.
Oh, thank you for those poems, Alejandro. I thought that I was going to be able to get my face together in enough time, and that's just how it went. But thank you so much for those beautiful poems.
Thank you.
Me and Camila both loved that reading. So thank you very, very much for sharing them with us. And we'll get to chat with you a little bit more in just a minute. So we're going to hear from a couple of more poets, and then we're going to talk to them all. And I'm very, very excited. Our next author is Jessica Helen Lopez, who I also love dearly. Jessica Helen Lopez is the City of Albuquerque Poet Laureate Emeritus 2014 to 16, and is the Youth Opportunities Director for the Native American Community Academy Inspired Schools Network. She's the author of 5 poetry collections. Her most recent book, The Blood Poems 2021, was published by UNM Press as part of the City of Albuquerque Poet Laureate series. She's a national award-winning slam poet, a Chautauqua scholar with the New Mexico Humanities Council, and a member of the Mocondo Foundation. Founded by Sandra Cisneros, it is a collective of writers of color who are dedicated to social justice and freedom of the arts. She is una Chicana, maestra, madre, poeta, lover of Chihuahuas, and is an advocate for women and gender-identified women's rights. An adjunct instructor for UNM Chicana and Chicano Studies Department. She also teaches for the Institute of American Indian Arts as a dual enrollment high school teacher. For bookings, please check out her website, Jessica Helen Lopez Poet, at wordpress.com. And of course, I'm going to post links to Jessica Helen Lopez's books. And I also am just so excited to see your face. Welcome, Jessica. You are muted, so I can't hear you yet, but
if I were to receive $1 for every time I've been muted, I would have $10. Hola, Susie.
It's so nice to see you and hear you as well. Thank you for joining us today. I'm so excited to hear your poems.
Gracias. Thank you for having me. I appreciate you. And bueno, muchos snaps for Alejandro Jimenez. I'm so glad to be a part of this group of wonderful poets sharing their words today. And so is my lovely dog. She's napping. She likes to sleep while listening to poesía. It gives her good dreams. I'm going to get right into it, y'all. This is a new piece. I wrote this at my kitchen table just this last week. In fact, sometimes I just go through some writing stints, and this was one that came out of it. So this will be the first time I share it with community. It's called Trenzas, and I don't have trenzas today. I took them out from earlier, but it's in honor of mis trenzas in general. Trenzas, really slick licorice sticks catching the light like an oil puddle mid-afternoon. Really, 2 long licks of dynamite, fuse fury, flammable, and the sizzle of sulfur. Really, a pair of woven birds, sweetgrass flying in the wind like 2 dizzy kites as I ride my hand-me-down bike, fast-footed and crazy-legged into a desert sunset. Really, birds cooing like lovers, really lovers slicing their wicked little wrists, really mama's laughter, daddy's anger, and last night's neon lit sins, transgressions, daughter, mama's laughter, daddy's anger. Really, tears, wet, slick, watery salt spit of the duct, sobbing, really sobbing like Chavela's last drunken, sorrowful song and bar brawl. Really, also the backhanded wood paddle brush thump of my aunties thumping against my head because I won't sit still. Really, scalp pulled so tight you can't see straight for a week. Really, the way my daddy used to wind bits of leather and feather into mis pelos before he decided he was bored of me and never touched my hair again. Really, black, 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 black in the winter. Really, red, brown, red, brown, red, brown, red, brown, a bit of gold in the summer. Really short, really long, really trenzas like a noose, like a jump rope, like a live wire, like red and green and white yarn. Really trenzas like Adalita, the left behind, the sisters, wives, cooks, maids, factory workers, like revolution, love, rape, and rage, like how Zapata took his women, slippery and sliding between his fingers. Trenzas like blood, trenzas like sugar, trenzas like hunger, trenzas like pan dulce, trenza de broche, trenza de almudevar, walnuts, almonds, and the sweet, rich body of figment, and raisin, trenzas de glaseadas, de crema, frutos secos. I've tucked a razor blade into my left trenza. A silver bullet sleeps in my right. I'm hiding an entwined secret in the lace and lattice of my hair, my braid, my breast, my milk, my meat, my life, my death, my lust, my revenge, the rope of my womanhood, blood in my hair, blood in the teeth of the comb, blood of the ribbon and bow, yoke and harness, Xochiquetzal, flower of desire. Realmente, mis trenzas son preciosas y malvadas. Mis trenzas te ajucarán hasta la muerte. Thank you, guys. Gracias. Thanks for allowing me to share my type of medicine with y'all. This next piece I actually wrote last year around this time for National Poetry Month. And so it's called For the Boys Bumping Kendrick. Loyalty was the word of the day. Fat booty bass oozing from their 4-door matte black Tacoma truck, spilling into the sunny autumnal afternoon all over Central Avenue. Their smiles were a collection of 5,000 lumen LED light bulbs, bobbing and weaving with a good time, necks swiveling, and every one of them wore their seatbelts like their mamas taught them. Their happy was infectious, y'all, and I caught it, thumping in the middle of my chest as I saddled my dusty red Jeep Wrangler next to their truck on the corner of somewhere. And that place, the traffic light, a big red halting hand telling the world to sit still for at least this moment. I'm an old lady by their standards, but they waved when they saw how I head nodded and mouthed the words, Kung Fu Kenny. Today, the morning news reported 4 dead bodies. Children shot up by another child while they sat at their desks, pumping out arithmetic and iambic pentameter, or maybe merely they just watched a wistful sun arc across grease-smeared school windows, bored chins propped by hands, eyes that averted the scribble-scrabble of whiteboard, ears that muffled the teacher's drone, or perhaps they thought about college or sex or about how their fathers and mothers can't afford the rent, but mostly they probably just thrummed with the energy of their young, youthful brains churning with whatever young thoughts they churned. And then a deep, low bass. Or was it a rattle of bullets like a snare drum? I can't remember what the reporter reported about what type of gun the boy used to squeeze a shower of lead from and into the soft, surprised bodies of his classmates. But he shot them dead. And this afternoon, they are still dead. And dead forever they will remain, crystallized in their youth, never to graduate, get a job, lose a job, fall in love, get divorced, raise a dog, lose a dog, go bankrupt, pay their first mortgage, travel to India, seek therapy for their midlife crises, ring in another new year, sing along to their favorite song. Kendrick says, shimmy yacht, rock. And he says, done been down so long, lost hope. Done come down so hard, I slowed. The boys were bright and alive and happy to breathe, to shine and shout together in unity. Loyalty, loyalty, loyalty. The light turned green. And off they drove with a wave and not a care in the world. Cool, as cool teenagers can be, 7 off to the golden shovel, probably playing hooky. I was so glad for them, so grateful for their beautiful, boyish urgency that I almost cried. My chest felt about to burst, spilling open all of my joy out and onto the dashboard, right there on the corner of somewhere. And that place, they drove off with the wave. Hey. Bueno. I dedicate that one to my students, mis estudiantes. I've got 2 more for you all. It's spring. Spring is popping. And with that comes all of my beautiful roses in my front yard here in Burque, where I live in Martinez Town, which is the second oldest town in Albuquerque. I've got bright, big, fat, red roses that are about to bloom. So, of course, I wrote a poem for them. It's called Ode to Velour Roses, War, and the Survival of My Divorce. Sweet light of the earth, wee rose, crimson star of the scarlet letter, bloom of the desert dirt, cinnamon dust and silt slippery as Christ's last day on earth, shroud of Turin. You rise from winter's slumber, blooming bold skirt of the ruffled petticoat, perennial flower of rosacea, red blot, and last season's love. Superior ovary of botany reminds me that spring is here, was not lost in the tide of the white winter blindness. I survived my swan song marriage. I survived. Then 6 months, almost 7 of a deep-rooted sleep, though I survived years of the hollow, comatose, but not death after all, chrysalis hiding, busy with subterranean magic, twirling, tilling, toil of the new twilight, crepuscular, muscled and primal, ancestor of the Rosa Gallica, medicine maker, velvet crimson glory, you move towards the hip seed in the smallest of increments, a pace almost made of nothing. I am your most patient nurse. I smell the blossoms, Parthian war, Persian flirt, large and showy prickle of red, stain of a clotted blood. How you gloat in the sunset, alive with an arrogant fire, conceited as fuck, but regal, and you know it. Little queens of the thorn, stalks of long neck, imperial regalia of orb and scepter, one bush, two bush, birth heavy, bashful at first, then a full fire, a raging light, green of the five leaflet wove in chlorophyll, an anatomy of miracles, sizzling with sun, awash in moon, quenched by jilted rains and the tender garden hose, feeding your mycelium, body fuel, and busy little fungi, stipule, petiole, lusty, floral, and fauna, braggadocious, dripping with your sex, Bordeaux, Cardinal, claret, red wine stain on a white blouse, pouty mouth, glamorous garnet, gleaming, gilded, imploding potpourri, sateen sprout of the sticky, knotted pistol, this one, then that one, then this one, then that one, then that one, and this one, then dozens and dozens and dozens, buds imploding, popping into existence like a slash of red. You slice open the day, manifold of morphology, sun-hatched bloody little bombs of beauty. I marvel at your glittering resilience to return, the way you wore your way back to existence, fragile rage and restoration of a holy, holy spring, perfume drunk. I am perfume drunk with my little power, a necromancer calling forth the floriculture of my front yard, rose beds. I prune, I pour horse shit into the pockets of my patch of earth, I beckon the flowers to rise and rise from the long darkness. I am the conductor, and you, my best seasonal symphony, ascending scale of frequency, thrumming with a silent growing pitch. I am drunk with an ancient knowledge. Only those who cheat death know. Only those who have tended to their grief as one does a beloved garden. The lip of the rose is the softest flesh, I know, but I have gone to war and have returned a fist. It is rich and good after all. Gracias. Thank you so much. I love my roses. I have one very short poem, and then I'm going to pass it back over to you, Susie Q. And muchas gracias. Thank you for having us. This is about my cousins who are cholas from Paramount. I'm a reformed chola. It's called How Reina and Gina Get Ready to Go Out, circa 1988. For the Paramount party girls of Long Beach. Hey, did we run out of the agua net or what, eh? No, estúpida. It's not agua net. It's aqua net. Whatever, tonta. Agua means water anyways. Agua. It's all the same thing. Cállate, bitch. You don't know nothing. Just say it right. Why? Who cares? You want to go to college one day, right? Yeah. Then don't fuck up words, peneja. The pinche güeras won't let you graduate. Graduate from where? High school or college? Both, idiota. Yeah, you right. Spensas, homegirl. Spensas. Wait, what do you mean, güeras? That sounds mighty racist of you, chavalita. Not all güeras, just those güeras who perpetuate institutional racism and stratification of our gente, therefore marginalizing people of color through means of cultural appropriation, politically positioned silencing tactics, and other insidious forms of oppression. Duh. ¿Entiendas, mendas? Oh, well, yeah, why didn't you just say that? Put that. Besides, fuck them güeras. Yeah, fuck them güeras.
And that's how you close the set. That was perfect. And that poem that you just read, is that from the Blood Poems?
It is, yes.
Make sure that you all gather your copy. from the link in the chat. Thank you so much for sharing those poems with us, Jessica. And I can't wait to talk with you more about them momentarily. Though I want to introduce our audience to our final guest, who is Rowie Shebala, officially Rowana. Rowie Shebala is a Native American of the Diné tribe and Chiwi tribe. Shebala is Tsenjikini Cliff Dweller clan, born for Dishini, Stark of the Red Street clan, and her maternal grandparents are the Big Water clan. Her paternal grandparents are the Zuni Frog clan. She is from Fort Defiance, Arizona, of the Navajo Nation. Shebala earned her bachelor's in theater at the Northern Arizona University and an MFA in creative writing at the Institute of American Indian Arts in Santa Fe, New Mexico. She has been featured on 4 National Poetry Slam teams, a 5-time representative on the Women of the World Poetry Slam, and a 2-time representative for the Individual World Poetry Slam, representing the following cities: Phoenix, Arizona; Sedona, Arizona; Flagstaff, Arizona; and Albuquerque, New Mexico. Her work has been featured in Button Poetry, Indian Country Today, in various zines and magazines such as Anak Press, Red Ink, Wicked Banshee Press, and Suspect Press. Shebala has performed her spoken word poetry at the Lincoln Center for the Out of Doors Project and nationally. She credits her father for gifting her with storytelling. Her words combine story, poetry, and performance. She is also a member of Sad Bihozo, the Diné Writers Collective. And without further ado, please welcome Rowie Shebala, who I'm so happy to see. How are you tonight, Rowie?
I am well, thank you. Hi, it's so good to see you, Susie. Thank you for having me here. I'm
Thank you
excited.
for sharing these poems. I can't wait to hear you read.
Oh, yeah, she'ero ana shabala union she sanjikin nishle dash cheatney bushes chint what's on you che nast ejer chanele. Hello, my name is Rowana Shebala, introducing you in my Diné language. So I'm gonna do some poems for you guys, and these are somewhat new. So here you go. Um, if my sister, if I was an Ewok, my sister would kidnap me and name me Sunshine. Well, actually, she said if I was an Ewok, she would rescue me and name me Sunshine, build me a tiny house in my backyard, make me salads out of sunflowers, comb my hair, tickle my belly until my feet start to look like hairy propellers. She would cuddle me until my dreams are of thick forest, high tree houses, 2 moons in the sky filled with endless stars. Cuddle me until my planet is emptied from warmongers, planet thieves, planet destroyers, golden gods, troopers, and rebels. She would cuddle us back to where our ancestors sang protection songs in the morning, beauty songs. She would tell me stories about her people, how strangers from a distant land came and forced them to march, how they had sticks that were made out of lightning rods that cut deep, forced them to march, and had them walk across the borders of their land, of their homeland, had them watch as they murdered their women and children. I would tell her stories about my people, how strangers from a distant planet forced us to fight for our lives, how they had sticks that shot out lightning, rods that burned deep, forced us to fight their war, had us watch as they murdered our women and children. She would tell me of how these strangers came on horses, how they ran her people off cliffs. I would tell her how these strangers came in the belly of a metal beast, how they ran over my people. She would tell me how they came like shooting stars. I would tell her how they came on shooting stars. She would tell me the day her people signed a treaty to go home, how they promised to learn their ways. She would sing the songs they sang as they made their way home into their sacred mountains, how they relit the fires in their homes to ward off future threats. I would tell her about the day when we watched the Death Star die, how we celebrated, how we used the helmets of our enemies as drums, how we raised the fires to ward off future threats. That was a day, she told me, they started to see more strangers on their lands. That was the day I started to see more strangers on my planet. More people with lightning sticks, more people with rods that burn deep, more like shooting stars riding in with flags, more like shooting stars riding in our fields. She would tell me how they said to her that they had to save her and her people. I would tell her how they said to me that they needed to save me and my people, how they would give us freedom, how would they rescue us from the dark side. They never stopped. Will they stop? She would tell me how they would never leave, for their comfort took her language and forced them to speak theirs, how they destroyed sacred sites, took their water until there was nothing left except for the litter of war. So they took to the stars, to a galaxy far, far away. We would sit there for a moment, let our tears run on familiar trails down our faces, holding each other as if we can put back the pieces, as if we can stop the stars. That's my first poem. And here is my second poem. So I am Dene, and I try to use as much language from my language, from my people. I'm not fluent, unfortunately, but I am trying to learn, so I try to use as much as I can. Um, in here, my Che, which is my maternal grandfather, he used to call me Asta Yaje. Asta means woman, and Yaje means little. So this is like little woman. He used to call me that when I was a kid. So this poem is kind of a replay from when I was a child. And so Esta Yaja runs from BBS. It was a June morning when Esta Yaja's mom dropped her off at her cousin's house on top of the hill. She told her cousin that she was to stay and play and not go anywhere. Esta Yaja and her cousin climbed to the top of the hills in her backyard, creating houses in cedar trees. Their walls were of rocks and sticks, old pieces of carpet for bed, plastic bags filled with blades of weeds for pillows. This was their home for the day, so they thought. At the bottom of the hill, on the dirt road, there was a white van with the letters VBS painted in red. Circling around the base of Asa Yaja's cousin's backyard, 3 white people, 1 man and 2 women, called to the children to come down from the hill. They promised cookies, Kool-Aid, and a puppet show. They promised them saving. Asa Yaja's cousin, and she knew who these people were because another cousin of theirs came home crying, holding their mom, sobbing to her, "I don't want to go to hell. I don't want to go to hell. Are we going to hell?" Asta Yaja's cousin told us how this white van picked her up, took her to church, gave her cookies as if she watched a ragged puppet tell her if she doesn't get saved, she will go to hell. Asta Yaja and her cousin ran from one hill to another hill as the white van followed them along the ravine, hoping Asta Yaja and her cousin would come down, thinking they didn't have food or water, but their dads taught them well. Taught them how to harvest prickly pears, where fresh spring water could be gathered, and how to find their way home through the canyon walls, along the arroyo, past the ruin. Asta Yaja looked to her cousin and said, "If we're going to hell, at least we know how to get back." I have one more poem to share, and these are like the shorter ones I want to share. These are like new poems. Like I haven't really shared these ones. These are from my new manuscript that I am writing, almost done with it. So this is called "When Songs and Stories Collide." This is about my mom and my dad. There in the center of my palm are my mom's lines, deeply indented in flesh canyons of my clan, Senjakine, cliff dweller people, small cracks of sagebrush and cedar trees in the windy valley. Her medicine hands, gentle hands, healing hands. There to my left, next to the doorway, I hear my dad's stories, soft and soothing, low cracks of embers from a fireplace, meticulous glass-beaded words, his hands He hands me a pen, reminds me that I too am a healer. Tells me, be careful with your words, for they are precious. I come from storytellers and song makers, from prayer. I come from survival and laughter, dirt roads and windmills, cornfields and silversmiths, from a womb of songs and a love story. Thank you so much for having me. I was really happy to share those particular poems with everybody. Yeah.
I'm so glad that you did. And I think I speak for everybody when I say we can't wait for this manuscript, Rowie. These poems are absolutely gorgeous. And I'm so glad that I got to hear new poems from you. This is all delightful. I would take whichever poems you want to give us, but I'm so glad that I got to hear all of you read. I'm still getting my face together a little bit. I've learned I just don't wear eyeliner when I know it's about to happen. And so I can recover relatively quickly. Thank you all for busting my heart open on this fine day. I love that all of you referenced something in your poems around who you come from, right? And like really kind of acknowledging the pathway. Can you tell us a little bit? And I'm not sure yet which order we'll go in to answer this question, but I'd love to know a little bit more about sort of your poetic lineage. Like, who would you say are your influences, and how did you inherit poetry?
I guess I'll go first. Everybody else is mic, so I'll unmute. The kind of like how I had mentioned that my dad was like the story, like he told stories. Every time he got after us when we were kids, he would follow it with a story of some sorts. So kind of growing up and looking at where my talent comes from, I would say like the way how he explained things and used story in that sense. It was that's where I kind of see where I was going from. And then also my clans, hearing those songs and those stories and particular prayers. So my manuscript is called Medicine Words. And that was kind of trying to going back and thinking about it and of where my words came from. And with those clients, it kind of came from those prayers and those songs and those stories type of thing. So it was interesting. It's interesting. And it's like, I don't know, that's kind of like going all the way back. Like, oh yeah, I can say like this poet and this person like influenced me when really it was just like embedded in my DNA. Does that sound a little, I don't know if that sounds like a little too like out there. I don't know. Okay, but yeah, that's where I kind of figured it.
I'm going to echo you, Rowie. Obviously, I mentioned a lot of my family members, if not by name, sometimes, just like referencing them, and the way I interacted with them, especially in my childhood, like the Cholitas, Reina and Gina, or my father, my auntie. But, they're my favorite storytellers, even if they were just talking shit, or like speaking in chisme, all the gossip. That's where you knew how not to go mess around over there, or that's dangerous over here, or here, this is where you get the best discount over here. It was about survivalism, but it was also about entertainment. There was an intersectionality of that. My mama could go to the marqueta, come back, have a story about how some lady was rude to her, but then they became best friends, and she would enact them as like herself and characters in the line. And I didn't even realize what she was doing when I was younger. And she is my favorite storyteller, but really all of my family members are. And they all have their own style. And I would also say another influence in my writing is hip hop and music. So some of my favorite storytellers are JJ Fad and Salt and Pepper and NWA. And that's why I'm so fond of alliteration that I obviously overdo it. But I would say those are my influences too. And just yeah, the lineage of who we come from and the land in which that we were raised to, whether we migrated, whether we were city dwellers, whether we lived on the borderlands. That definitely informs my writing and my love for language and that code switching.
Yeah, I think to echo what both Roy and Jessica said, I think definitely my mother too. And when you're talking about like how your mom would like impersonate people, and I'm like, yeah, like that's my mom, as well. And just growing up in a really, really small town in Mexico, like you just like hang out the street, just like post and like you just hear all the cheese man, like, and yes, it's good, but like the telling of it is so much better, because you have like just that energy and and stuff like that. So I think that's really, really cool. Also too, I think going with other art forms, corridos, I think are for me have always been, even before I started thinking more about like, oh, like how have my family members influenced me. Like it was always corridos. I love the storytelling in it. Like older corridos, not like the newer like narco stuff, but like the old ones. Like that tell a story, and there's like beginning, middle, and end all within like 2 minutes. And it's just like so captivating. And there's a structure to it. And so it's I'm just hearing. I could probably like sing songs before I could probably speak, so like corridos.
Do you want to give us a sample of one of your favorite corridos real quick?
Catarina y los rurales se agarraron a balazos. Catarina y Chavala, los rurales, cañonazos. It's about Catarino. It's about Catarino, which is an actual story. It happened in the early 1900s, about 5 or 6 years before the official date of the Mexican Revolution, right? But it was Catarino's indigenous person who was like, and there was like, a bunch of like his community, right, in Nayarit, and the rurales came to like kick them off the land because the rich landowners were like, yo, they're like in our land, and we're but that wasn't it, right? Like Catarino had all the paperwork, and they just started killing them. And the song's about how like Catarino just like killed a bunch of rurales trying to defend the land for like years until they like ambushed him, and killed them. But I don't know, like the story of it is really cool, man. And you can like actually find like the actual story on YouTube. It's really amazing, really beautiful. Like women were like all into it too, like we talk about the Adelitas, and it's just like pre-Adelitas, or maybe they were the Adelitas that became the Adelitas, I don't know, but it was just super, super amazing stuff. Like the whole community just got behind this dude and just like created this like guerrilla, basically, that like fought these rurales for like ever, but that's a pretty cool story. But
and hopefully use their helmets for drums too, right? That line that Rowie gave us, right? It's just like that image was so crisp and so beautiful. It's just like, oh, and it was I loved the way that you wove in like this speculative fiction angle into like fact and historical fact, right? And current fact. And it was I love the way that you wove those together. I want to know a little bit more too. What do so now are each of you are pretty successful writers. I'm wondering, are you also like designated as your family's storyteller? Are you the official one? And what kind of like, and what, if so, what does that feel like?
Well, you always get hit up for an occasional poem, right? Somebody's getting married, someone's quinceañera, someone's retiring. So it's like, hey, Jessica, can you write a poem? Well, yes, I can. Sometimes it's like, can you like get it done by tonight? Well, okay, well, yes, I can. You want it to be an epic poem, or do you want it to be a series of some, tonka? You want it to be some haiku? But I think that there's a responsibility there. It's like my brother, Angel. He's our resident photographer and videographer. We know he's going to always have the photos of our family gathering. He's going to put together a video. I'm the scribe, and also with that comes like a type of family tree. You keep track of who's doing what, who was born, who passed away, especially with us folks who maybe create collections or series of pieces. We're actually in real time observing and commenting on the state of our family, or our neighborhoods and our community for that matter, or, current events. So they're like little time capsules in a sense. I feel like that with all of my pieces. And I can remember, that's the year we said goodbye to our cousin, Sarah Jo. She passed away at a very young age. That's the year, that baby Max was born. So I think in a way it's, your family knows that. Maybe there is an obligation, but it's something that's innate. I don't want to speak for all of us, but I'm guessing that's probably similar across the board.
I am the official writer of all things for my family. So my sister just recently got married, like this past Friday. She got married, and I was a wedding planner. So I was planning the whole thing, and then a week before the wedding, she was like, "Can you write a poem about like for our wedding?" And I'm like, "I can, but it's not going to be like what it's not going to be what I want it to be because I want to take my time and make sure I go through and it's beautiful and what I can, but um, I'm going to politely decline because I still need to make sure that the caterer and everything else is all set up." And so it was interesting with that, but and then I'm also the writer when it comes to like, can you write a complaint letter of so and so? Can you write? Can you help me with a resume? Can you help me with this like a reference letter or something? So it's this like word writer for that is just like pretty much universal. So like with technical and then also like with creative. So and then I know my sisters are teachers too, so they're like, "Can you help us? Like, what type of lesson plan can we do with poetry, or how can we teach this, or explain to me this type of craft?" And I'm like, "Okay, I'll try to do the best that I can to help you guys get this together." So it's been interesting. It's especially after getting my master's, and therefore like you're the master poet, so you know all. Like I don't. I'm still learning. It's been interesting. I like it, and but I'm also like very careful too. Just kind of like how I said, like my words are like medicine words. The way my dad has been teaching me is to be very careful of what I put out in the world. So I try to be very intentional with what I write, how I write it. Um, so it's been interesting. It's just kind of been interesting, I guess, being more careful than I used to be with my poetry.
I want to respond to a comment that Alyssa said. Oh, Alejandro was ready. I think referring to corrido. Always ready. Corridos are life. No, I was ready with that one just because I was, I was visiting, classrooms this morning, and with the ESL students, all and we're from Latin America, and so I started singing, and I feel them start singing with me. I was like, aha, yes, you do know this song. But yes, I was ready. Am I the storyteller poet of my family? I have a long ways to go. I'm not. And I think a lot of it has to do because of language, right? A lot of my work, a lot of success I found in writing initially was in English, right? So my parents don't know English. Most of my family members do not know English, right? And it was until like I don't know. I guess I like write a lot in Spanish, but I don't have like the venues to read them at, And if I do, like people don't really understand them, right? Because audience doesn't speak Spanish a lot of the times. But now I think, going on to Mexico and being invited and like now that they saw like work that I do in Spanish, they're like, oh, we understand this, and so they're like super into it, but I'm not sure if I'll become the retailer, I still think I'm like, they still treat me like a little kid, which is, annoying, but whatever. But yeah, I think now it's going to be interesting to navigate that now that like I said, now that they know what kind of stuff I write about in Spanish. A lot of it is just about our family and the shit that we go through, right? And so which will be interesting and awkward, but also probably really beautiful to navigate. So we shall see what they say.
That was going to lead right to my next question too, Alejandro. So when you're like telling your family stories, all of you like speak pretty clearly like about what's happening in your community, what's happening in your family, and also like very much like this truth telling in poems. Have you ever had to like deal with a consequence of like of your writing, particularly within your family or close community, where you wrote something that they did not enjoy as much? I'm curious, like, have you ever had to navigate some of that? Or for Alejandro's not maybe yet, but Jessica, Rowie, do you have some advice for Alejandro when he goes through it?
No, I'm just kidding. You know what? That's a great question because I actually have run into some hot water in the past. One of my mentors, Levi Romero, he's a profe at UNM Chicano Studies. He's our current New Mexico State Poet Laureate. He echo what Rowie was saying about the intentionality about your words and what you put out there and who may come across it and who may read it. So you're like, spilling all your family secrets. we had this really nuanced conversation around, however, I write for survivalism, right? So from the things that I've observed or witnessed or experienced as a survivor of domestic violence, right? And growing up in a community, especially in Los Angeles, that, you know, is high in crime, I had to write about those things because I had to get them outside of myself and out here. Otherwise, they would poison me. They felt toxic. So I had to put them in words. This form of expression that I had, these medicine words. With that, though, you know, your audience may be those same predators or perpetrators, or even if there is some forgiveness there. And so I've had to really toe that line and make those intentional decisions. Am I going to write this? Yes, I always decide that I am going to write that. But I'm definitely aware of some of those harder poems that I do create that I need to. And then I typically try to brace myself, but I know I'm better off for writing them if I weren't. It's not an easy answer. That isn't just something like, oh, well, this is how you do it. Compartmentalize it this way, because that's just, as we all know, it's just not as clean cut as that. It's messy and beautiful, but messy. And
Yeah, that's so funny. I'm like, whoa. When you say E, like for us, like, yeah, like yeah. So I know when younger, when I first started writing, um, some of my works had like a lot of curse words in there, and so I was really proud of those poems because it just seemed like a very like explosive, very just very feeling poem, I guess. But then like, just using the different type of languages, and um, I mean, like it's then my family got a hold of it. They're like, "Why are you using this language? Why are you talking like that? This is not how we raised you. This is not how you're supposed to be." So it's just like coming from, I guess, um, I want to say my family is a little conservative in a way. So certain things I would have to talk about. It just now, like when I write, I want to make, like I said, very intentional, but at the same time, something that would represent myself in a good way, and also represent my family in a good way. But there are poems that I know some of them that can be in denial, a lot like kind of Jessica had spoken. I had shared with you, like I this past year I was diagnosed with diabetes, and I do like the pandemic really helped like perpetuate or just kind of bring that on because we were stuck at home, and the only type of like foods that were available were um, like they weren't fresh because we had to go to the store. When you go to the store, you're scared of getting COVID type of thing. So that made me kind of think about the food deserts that are on like the reservation. There's even already with that they had a problem with getting fresh food already and being that. So I wrote a poem about it, and it was pre-pandemic, but then that was just and I was borderline at the time, and I was working to get away from it. But then the pandemic happened, and it just kind of became control. So I wrote a poem about it, and in that poem talks about my family who have a history of diabetes and how they kind of talk about perpetuating like, you should lose weight, or you should do this, you should do that, you should eat this way. But like at every family meal, like they have fried bread and they have all these like unhealthy foods. But at the same time, like no, no, no. Like so, it was interesting having that conversation, and I brought this I wrote this poem, and I only shared it with a few family members, like my brother who works in the health field. Like it made him cry. He loved it. Just this is gonna save someone's life. So that made me feel really good. But then like everybody else who were like, no, that's not how you are. No, that's not. You know, like it's I know when it comes out. I did a project with the bigger picture. And so and then also with a program in Gallup, Mexico called Hope, and it's just like this like public like PSA for on how to like defeat diabetes. And they talked about all these different things. So we went to this whole history of like food deserts and everything, and it hit a whole lot of things and a whole lot of things that had happened to our people. So like how our food, like for instance, a long time ago, they burned all the crops out. The Navajo Reservation, the government burned all the crops down. They killed the animals, so they would rely on government food. And that's kind of like where it all started. So we did this whole research, but that right there is just like my research and everything, what I'm going through. It's going to come out, and I'm trying to brace myself on how that how it's going to be received. So it's going to be interesting. But at the same time, like I told, I guess you could say I warned them ahead of time in a way, and trying to have conversations with them and trying to see things. So it's going to be interesting how that's going to happen. So that's one thing, and then also like just the calls. But that's how I'm dealing with it. I know that was too long of an explanation of things.
Not at all. I think that you also just kind of like gave us some insight around that poem, and we can't wait to read this collection. And giving people like that heads up is, I think, what a wonderful kindness. I just tell my family members when they're upset about something is to stop Googling me. And it's like, if you don't want to be over here, don't come over here. But it's like, you're much kinder than I am about it. Like, you don't have to read my poems. I would still love you. But I also love that they give you a heads up around writing a poem for an event, because most of the time, like, I'll just be at a family barbecue and they're like, Susie, do a poem real quick. And like, but I'm eating. It's very, so this is just how we treat each other, I guess. But we do have a wonderful question here from the audience here, and it's a great question. How do you integrate your ancestral language into your poetry? Does it come naturally, or does it come in English first and then you translate to your native tongues because it sounds better? Like, what is your process? Because all of you write bilingual poetry, or trilingual, as the case may be.
So with my language, I'm not fluent. And I guess kind of where that comes from is like with the whole residential schools and how they pretty much like made sure that ended. But my dad is fluent, so whenever I want to write something, I would call him up or sit him down and ask him, like, can you tell me, this is what I want to write, this is how would I say this in Dinef Azad, how would I say this in our language? And it's really awesome too, because he would go into detail about how to break the word down, what it means, different concepts, different stories. So it's just like I have to make sure I have time to sit down for at least an hour to get like a small 3 or 2 word for word like thing that I want into my poetry to get that lesson. So, and then there are some words like that just come naturally. So like Asla Yaje, like that one was a name that my Che called me. Che is how we would say maternal grandfather. Nully is our paternal grandparents type of thing. So those words are like they were taught to us from the beginning. So like Che, Nully, and then just like different words. Like you would hear a Diné person saying Yadala. So that's another like kind of like a expression type of thing, like oh my god, or like really, or just type of thing. So you would, and if you see me at my posts or anything, you'll see like Yadala. So we like for my boyfriend, like he'd be saying something like Yadala, this guy, like oh my god, this guy, or even with so just like different words and different phrases that I would get from my people and from Brink coming up. So that's kind of how I've been trying to navigate it, and then also just trying to learn more of my language. And my sisters are great because they're both teachers, and because of the whole pandemic, we kind of lost some cultural teachers, so they had to like pick up, and they like, I'm a cultural teacher, I'm a Navajo language teacher, so they're learning a lot. So I call them too, and also like, how do I say this? So I was like, in returns, I'll write a poem. So yeah.
So it's community, collective. And Alejandro, do you write in Spanish first, English first?
Well, it depends what it's about. I think it really depends what it's about. I think a lot of the stuff that I have in Spanish, most of it, I have like bunch of poems in Spanish are all about me being a kid in Mexico, or a lot of them, being a kid in Mexico, or things that happen in Mexico, not necessarily to me, but things that I saw or whatever. So, and remember in 2012, Susie, Hoser and I were trying to write this poem about the school teacher that sang to her students when there was like a shooting outside the school in Monterrey, and we tried to write it, and I'm not sure how Hoser feels about it, but I didn't. We tried writing in English, and like I wrote my stuff, and I was like, it doesn't feel right, and so I like left it, and then like last fall, when I knew I was going to go down to Mexico, I looked back at that poem, I looked back at the story, and I was like, you know what? This feels better in Spanish. And so I just wrote it, and then boom, like within an hour, I had that poem, and I was like, oh wow, I like this, and so it just really depends what it is, I personally like, I like didn't grow up speaking like it was either all Spanish or English, in school and like at home it was just all Spanish with my parents, and at school most of the time it was just mostly Spanish with my peers, and so like I don't use like a lot of like I don't interweave like Spanish in like my English poems a lot, just because like that's not how my mind thinks, and so it's really difficult for me to like I'm trying to do it right now, but like I'm like, oh, I can't even like go back in between both languages, I have to like really think and concentrate on one. It's like even when I write, it just doesn't feel natural to me, it feels like I'm trying too hard to do something, so right now I'm like either all or not. And there's like little snippets, right? Like the poem that I read about the trash, like I was like, I debated, I was like, should I write it in Spanish? Because like that happened 100% in Spanish. It wasn't 0 English, right? And so I still haven't tried to play around with that, but I wanted to make sure that like I left the actual like conversation or the phrases that people told me in Spanish. I originally had translated them so people would understand, and I was like, yeah, fuck that, dude. Like if they understand, cool. If that, then whatever. There's enough context around it, I think. So, but yeah, just because in my mind, like the way they said it was super fucking funny. Like 7:00. 6,
That reminds me of Gloria Anzaldúa, right? The late great queer theorist from Brownsville. She didn't translate any of her writing from Spanish. If she wrote in Spanish, it was in Spanish. And then it was like, well, you've got to figure that out, non-Spanish speaking readers, but I'm not going to translate it for you, though she wrote in English too. But yeah, I'm a code switcher, soy pocha. And the way my brain thinks is that I wasn't taught Spanish because my mother wasn't allowed to speak it at school. That was her first language, and she was shamed for it and punished for it. So by the time she had children, she didn't want us to experience that necessarily. Times had changed, but had they really? By the time me and my brothers came around. And so English was the primary language spoken in my house, except of course we had Grandma Tomasa. She only spoke Spanish. I couldn't ever have a conversation with my great grandmother, who's a curandera, or my grandma Agustina, who was another curandera. A lot of cultural knowledge was lost there. Can you imagine if I would have been able to have these conversations with Agustina and Tomasa? I couldn't. And I remember wishing so badly that I could speak Spanish when I was younger. I would even pretend that I could, but I knew some words, right? And obviously when they didn't want the children to know something in front of all the bochas, they spoke primarily in Spanish. That's where all the good chisme was. But that's how I picked up the way that I do code switch, and that comes naturally. So oftentimes I might be like, hey, hola, ¿cómo estás? Bueno. And then also the Chola dialect comes into play from LA, Los Angeles, Long Beach, and then here in Nuevo Mexico and Purque. And, the question posed by Alejandro Gonzalez, is that I think that we think in a type of diction as writers, when we think about it in craft, or at least that's how I think. What am I writing? What's the content? What's the tone? Is this a persona piece? And then I think that there's something that happens on a poetic craft level that also assists us to make those decisions about, am I going to write in Tinepasad, in Espanol only, in English and Spanish? I don't think it's a set rule. It changes poem per poem, but And especially because I incorporate a lot of Nahua, which is the language of the Mexica. And I've learned a lot of that through like ceremony here, or ceremony with my family up in Denver as well, and with the Capulis. And through that, then it's like this guided language acquisition as you're writing. Because when we do our research, that's what this means. Oh, that sounds like aguacate. Oh, this is. And so before you know it, you're also teaching yourself through the act of that writing, when you are going in and out of the mother tongues that you may or may not have at your fingertips.
That's really interesting. So, like, when I first read your question, Hando, I said, "How do you integrate your ancestral language into your poetry?" And I was like, I don't know my freaking ancestral language, And so, and I actually just had this question last night at an event, right? And like, I love writing in Spanish, but like, because freaking Spanish fucking colonized, and like, I can't. Even if I wanted to learn, I don't know, because they did such a freaking good job. And killing us down there, at least, and also like just the whole, you don't want to be indigenous or whatever, right? So all that shame that comes with it, right? And so even if I wanted to learn, I don't know what language, right? I could go to learn Nahuatl probably, but like, we know for a fact that we weren't Mexicas or whatever, there's no place for me to start. So when that question comes up, or when your question came up, Hannah, I was like, I don't, dude, and I was like, but it's always really interesting to feel like, or what always comes up around language, because I write a lot in Spanish, is like, well, like shit, learn whatever. No, like, what my native language is, or whatever. And so, I just find it really interesting that like, I have to like, so my family understands what I'm going through. I have to like write in this, I just find that super like.
One thing that I noticed, the phrase that you shared, Rowie, like it sounded very much like a phrase that I've heard Muslim friends use, Ya Allah. And so it means the same thing, right? And, of course, Arabic people conquered Spain for hundreds of years, and much of Spanish is influenced by Arabic. So look at how it all comes, like how these words are all connected to each other, and these phrases just like, wow. Like, and so here, like, it's interesting to see where language comes from and how it evolves and the ways that we use it.
Alhambra, those are words from like Arabic that are used in Spanish.
Yeah.
Right?
Definitely. Yeah. I had there are so many connections between language and also like the ways that they tell the story of people's movements. I want to thank you all for being here. I know I've kept you longer than I asked you to stay, but I appreciate this conversation. Of course, we could do this all night. Easy. I hope that we get to do this again. I hope to have many, many more conversations with you about your poems. I love getting to hear your poems, and then also hearing you talk about them and how you come to them is so fascinating to me. And I could easily do this all night. When we're together in real life, we do this all night. Me and Jessica Helen Lopez have definitely seen the sun come up together more than once. So, like, talking about these very things. I miss you all very much, and I'm so happy to see your faces on my screen. Thank you all so much for saying yes. And thank you everyone at home watching now. For those of you watching later, please check the comments and support these writers' work. Go to their websites and buy their books and support their projects and ask them what they're working on, what their dream projects are, and support those too. Thank you again so very much. I'm so glad you joined us, and we will see you next time.
Bye, y'all.